Hey everybody. Sorry I've taken so long to post another video. So today I'm going to show you some break processing stuff, like I promised in last video. Um, so anyway, basically, first off, I created a pattern, so that I can just press play and mess with it afterwards. So this is what it sounds like. Alright, so that's cool. So I already did the processing because it's a little bit time consuming and I don't really want to, I don't know, I don't just want to go through the entire process. But I'll show you what I did. So right now I like to hook it up with like a separate combinator for all the processing. So here, if you remember, this is our whole break combinator, and then here's my processing. And I'm just gonna I'm gonna turn it down a bit because it's loud. But I'm gonna unbypass that, and you can hear how much bigger it sounds. Well, anyway, so I'm just gonna show you guys a little bit of what I did. I don't really like Reason's M-Class equalizer that much, but it's the only good equalizer in the program. The main reason why I don't like it is because you only have two bell curves, and that's kind of annoying. But basically in this first one, the way I link everything up, if we press tab, you can see. So I have the output of the break going into the combi input in the break processing. And I always use my trackpad, but the mouse is so much faster. So I have that, then the combi output's going into the mixer, obviously. And then the two devices is going into my effects chain, and then the effects chain is going out into the from devices. And basically I just have everything, in serial. So audio input into the equalizer, into the next equalizer, into the next equalizer. I have a bunch of equalizers, wow. And then a compressor afterwards, the Scream 4, which I use it for the tape setting. It's very nice for that. And then I have a maximizer, which I use not as a limiter, but for soft clipping. And then a stereo imager that I believe I use it just for high passing it at 100 hertz. So I'll show you guys everything. So here I have low cut on, low shelf is down all the way so that it has a dip, because honestly this break is sped up, it's pitched up, so there's not a lot of really low frequencies. At about, I'd say, like 100 hertz or something, I have a little bit of a bump in order to bring up, I could actually make this cue a little bit narrower. Yeah, there you go. A little bit of a bump to bring out the weight of the kick, and over here at what? Ooh, it was like 450 hertz or something like that. And really, what you want to do is tune it to where the kick is. So the way that you can figure this out is by doing this. So that's bringing out the weight, the fundamental of the break of the snare. So I'm going to bring that down to like a moderate level. I don't know, like 5 dBs. And then widen it a little bit and. Cool. And then I used another EQ in order to bring up the highs at around here at like the 5 something kilohertz, you know, to bring out the cymbals and the hi-hats. And I have a little bit of a dip in between the kick and the snare to add more definition, more space in between the kick and the snare. And then all of these are just surgical EQs. And basically I went and I would sweep through the break, and you just do this as many times as you need. You just sweep through it like I did before, and you find offending frequencies. You find frequencies you don't like. So yeah. So basically here, there's one down here, and one up here that I don't like, and actually, cool. There was like a mid-range sort of that I wasn't feeling. So by widening it a little bit, I cut out more frequencies in that mid-range. And everything else is unhindered. And then there was also like up here, like way up here, there was like a really high ringing that I wasn't feeling. Basically, you just do this to taste, you know. But there's also a real reason why I do this, and that is if you're going to be playing your tunes, you know, in a club on a big old system, you know, at a rave on a big old system or whatever, a lot of these super like high frequencies are actually painful. Like at really high volumes, they're painful, like the standout frequencies. So you can cut them out using these techniques. And with all these, I pretty much did the same thing. I found frequencies I wasn't feeling, or that were, you know, painful if you boost them a lot. So that means that when they're really loud, like they'll stand out. So I cut those out. Then I use the compressor. And there's no right way to use a compressor. And a lot of people are like, oh, you gotta compress everything. You don't. But with a lot of these classic breakbeats, they don't have that much punch, and they're not up to par with what you're trying to do. So I'm going to show you guys the process by which I do my breakbeats. I'm actually gonna bypass all of these. So you can just hear what the compressor does. I'm gonna bring it in its standard settings. It's like this. Everything is just up in the middle, right? And I mean, it sounds pretty good with just its basic settings. Like, I'm gonna turn up the maximizer because it's lost a lot of volume. But the way that I do compression is, it's a little unorthodox, but it works. And the idea is, I'm going to explain to you guys what a compressor is. Okay? There's not a lot of videos on YouTube that explain actually what a compressor is. Think of a compressor as an automatic level fader. It's automatic, okay? And what we have input gain and output gain. That's pretty self-explanatory, all right? That's the volume it goes in and the volume it goes out. Okay, now a compressor turns down levels above the threshold. So if we have it here at negative 18.4 dB, when it's above the threshold, it starts turning. When a sound is above the threshold, it starts turning the volume down. It turns the volume down. And it turns the volume down by the ratio that you specify here. At 1:1, it's not doing anything. At 2:1, it's having, like, the volume is half of what it was. 4:1, it's a quarter, so it's turning it down at a 4:1 ratio. Now, attack and release settings. The attack and release. Attack is how much time it takes for the compressor to turn it down. What this means for drums is that you bring out the transient, because you're turning down everything after the transient, and then you can make up for it in the output gain. But you're turning down everything after the transient, so you're bringing out the transient. And release is how long it takes for the compressor to stop turning stuff down after it goes back below the threshold. I hope all of that made sense to you guys. So honestly, the thing about release is that it's really subtle. You don't notice a lot. Like, if you have 0 release, it actually kind of distorts a little bit. And sometimes you want that, but usually don't. It sounds a bit cleaner if you don't do it that way. So the way that I go about doing compression, it's super unorthodox, but it works. I turn my gain input up a little bit, so alright, so check this out. Threshold all the way down, ratio all the way up, turn up soft knee. I was using it because, soft knee, basically it puts a curve on the knee, on where the, so if you look at it in terms of a graph, I'm just going to, move my mouse to show you. A compressor would look like this. Do, right? Or do. Actually, the Ableton compressor is really good for visualizing that, or a lot of, plugins like the FabFilter compressor, it shows you what it's doing. But basically, this is regular volume, and then here's the threshold, and then dupe. It's turning it down. So what the soft knee does is it puts a curve on it. So what it means is that everything above the threshold is turned down uniformly, but with a soft knee, what it does is that it turns it down more the louder you go, and less when it's softer. So the soft knee, basically, it adds more transparency, and you can actually compress at much higher ratios when you use a soft knee, because it's it's a gradual thing. It's not instant. So anyway, I turned my threshold all the way down and my ratio all the way up. You don't want to do this as your final sound, because it's going to sound like butt. And then I turn the attack all the way down. What I use this technique for is for seeing what attack times I want. So we're going to press play. It's going to sound horrible right now, but yeah, see, that's super squashed. But now, what doing this allows me to do is I can clearly hear the attack as I creep it up. You hear that snap at the beginning of every drum? then I bring down the threshold and the ratio, or I bring up the ratio and the threshold down, because you don't want to take all the dynamics out of the break. You just want to take out some of it so that it sounds fatter. Yeah. And then you want to compensate for that with the output gain a little bit, so basically, so what we're doing here is we have an attack time of 67 milliseconds, so that means the transient is 67 milliseconds long. Alright, and the release, it's honestly not super important, but you don't want releases way under 100. I'm not really sure why you, honestly, like, release settings on a compressor are it's so subtle that you just gotta fiddle around with it and whatever sounds good to you. Like I said, there's no, I don't know actually if I said this, but there's no right way to do any of this, you know, it's just like what you like. And, you know, understanding how things work. But I have the threshold up here, so basically anything above 20 dB is going to be turned down by a 3.2 to 1 ratio. So, and because I have the attack at that, so there's the transient, and then it turns it down right after. So it gives it a pop. Alright, so moving on. Here's another type of distortion. I really just use it, I like to use it kind of on like a light setting. It's the tape setting on the Scream 4. Now tape it's awesome. If you're familiar with other DAWs, it can do kind of a similar thing to the PSP Vintage Warmer. I think the PSP Vintage Warmer sounds better, but this is, I mean, it's all right. It's as good as you can get in Reason. So with the tape, okay, this is the speed of the tape. The lower you have it, the less high frequency it has. If you have it all the way up, it kind of has a lot of shrill high frequencies. But it's getting like a warmth to it, a tape warmth. And then this is the compression. This is how much it compresses. And honestly, you don't need to use a lot. If you put it up all the way, it becomes a limiter. And that's pretty cool too. But I like to keep the compression on low because I don't want to compress stuff too much because I already used a compressor. So, and then, you know, I just did that. You guys saw me do that. I turned down the mids a little bit because of that frequency that I wasn't feeling in the mid range. That little tweak that I did in this video. And then I put on body. You don't need to do body, but I think if I have it on type E or type D, it makes it sound fatter. Kind of a, you know, that's to taste. If I put it on auto, though, it sounds kind of weird. I haven't really figured out exactly what body does. I just kind of fiddle around with it. That's something I gotta look into. Sorry, guys. But then moving on. Maximizer. So with the maximizer, I have the input gain turned up ridiculously because I think it was at a pretty low volume and I wanted it to be, you know, close to the clipping level. And I turn off the limiter because I don't want to use the limiter. The limiter will just cut off anything above 0, and I don't really want that. Instead, what I want is soft clip, which does the same thing as the limiter, but it's an incredibly fast release limiter, And what it does is it actually adds a little bit of harmonics, a little bit of warmth, a little bit of punch, of crunch to it. You know, it's like a really slight distortion. And I just turn it up all the way, because if I turned it down, then I'd actually be clipping. I don't want to clip. You don't ever want to clip. You never want anything above 0. I don't care what anybody tells you. You don't want anything above 0. All right? In fact, when I do my mix downs, I want my final mix to be at minus 6 dB, so that I can later, so that I have some headroom to limit it. And then with this stereo imager, I was mistaken earlier. I didn't really look at what I had. I have this set. What did I do? Oh, I have solo high band. Oh, right. So I cut everything above like 300 frequencies that it's kind of high. If I turn it down, yeah, that's good, But the thing is that I actually layered the break with another set of drums, so I had this at about 300 so that it didn't compete with the other kick drum. And using the solo high band, and I mean the stereo imager is great because you can widen stuff, but with mono sounds, it loses its punch. So you don't want to do that with bass. You pretty much want to use it with stuff that already has some stereo space to it. So if you used a chorus, if you used, like a reverb, using this will bring it up. And that for low band, like anything below 100 hertz, mono. Needs to be mono, not like a little bit mono. No, like straight up mono, alright? You want straight up mono for that bass. I mean, for that sub bass, okay? For bass, like mid-range type bass, yeah, you want some stereo space. It'll make it sound louder. But when it's mono, because subwoofers are mono, all right? So it loses its punch if you have the two speakers out of phase, which is essentially what it does. Also, I've been told for pressing vinyl, it's a nightmare. It'll make your needles skip. So yeah. So that's how I processed the break. And then I just added some drums to it. Now, listen to how it sounds with the drums added. Well, that's big. And what I did here, I used a Kong, right? And I set it up with a kick. Just one kick. I didn't layer them or anything, because I'm already layering it with with the break anyway. There's a snare and a hat. And a hat. Yep. And then I put an equalizer on the kick, so I boost around here because it's a low kick. It's a low kick. I'm boosting at 50 hertz. I mean, I'm just trying to bring that out, even though I'm going to be cutting out everything below 100 hertz anyway, because you got to leave room for that sub, but it'll still bring up whatever's left from that crossover. Around this area, it was sounding a bit bloated. This whole range, like the 200 hertz range, it's all mud when it's on a kick. And then I brought up the high a little bit to bring out the transient, the punch. I did the same thing that I did with the brakes and the on the compressor. So you don't really need to compress a lot of kick drums from sample packs, which is why I'm only using like a slight 2-to-1 setting, and a pretty high attack. Like, you don't want to compress a lot of these drums from sample packs because they're already compressed and they're probably done by people who know what they're doing with it better than you do. that's just my, that's my opinion. Oh, and low cut, duh. You low cut everything. Just low cut everything. It's good. Like, look, you can't really hear anything below 30 hertz anyway, so you just might as well. I mean, your subs I don't really low cut unless I have like a really deep sub. And honestly, like if I'm looking at a spectrum analyzer and I see like I have like that sub is hitting like 20 hertz, I can't hear it though. I don't have a sub in my studio. I just have a pair of monitors. Nice monitors, by the way. Project Studio 6's events. I got them back in like 2004 for like, they were a floor model, and I got them for like 300. The list price was like 700. Great deal. For the snare, I cut out the lows. You cut out the lows because there's not really that much in the snare, and you don't want stuff, in the same frequency range as your kick. I bring out at about the 200, 300. Depends on the snares. Do the sweep technique and find that sweet spot. Find the fundamental of the snare and then boost it a little bit. And then I boost a little bit in the high to bring out the crack of the snare, and I brought up the high a tiny amount, like an actual high shelf, like a tiny amount out there, just bringing out the crack. And then here I have a couple surgical EQs because there were a couple offending frequencies that I wasn't feeling. And then I do, again, light compression. Actually, this is kind of a heavy compression. I can do less. So, I have that. And then, what? Adobe Reader Updater. Fuck you. Alright. Oh, pardon my language, guys. Anyway, I have all of these. So each one of these individual drum chains, right, I have that all routed into their own line mixer thing. And for the hi-hats, I don't really do anything. Alright, like you can EQ it, and it's whatever. But I don't really do anything. And I add a reverb to my line mixer and put it on the aux just to give some space to the hats, and then I use a stereo limiter, like I said before, as a high cut. So I have, if you bring it down to 100 hertz, it cuts out everything below 100 hertz, which is great for mixing with subs. Wish this thing would just go away. Alright, and so yeah, so that's how I did this. Oh, a little bit about my pattern in the main drums. I basically made it match up with the breaks. So the kicks and the snares match up with the kicks and the snares and the break. That's really it. You might have to like go in like A-B back and forth in order to see it, but that's how I did it. And the hats, I just have like a or something like that. I don't know. Oh yeah, so that snare's like, and then the hat's sort of in between. I like to do what we call linear drums, where you only have one sound really playing at one time. It sounds cool. So yeah, anyway, that's how I did that. That's how you can process breakbeats. There's no right way to do it. That's just how I do it when I do it in Reason. I do it differently in other programs. So anyway, thanks for watching. I love you all.